All right, folks. Good afternoon, good morning for those of you on the West Coast or in morning time zones. For those of you on the East Coast, good afternoon. Great to have everybody here today. We're excited. We got a superb panel of folks to give you some insights on the future of performance contracting. We're a couple housekeeping items before I go ahead and kind of introduce everybody that's going to be joining us. If you have any questions, I ask just put them in the question and answer box. I would prefer that you don't put the questions through the chat. Rather use the Q&A box so that we can keep and manage tabs on them. And we will have a Q&A at the end. Um, so a little bit about our team here. I'm David Diaz. I'm the managing partner at Walker Reid Strategies. Very soon to be Walker Blue. We're in the middle of a merger with Blue Energy Group, so we're really excited about that. And I think we'll officially start launching some of that collateral and branding here in early August. So we're excited to be part of a bigger energy tax incentive team. For those of you who know me, we specialize in energy tax incentives, energy engineering, a little bit of all services to the ESCO and performance contracting industry that we can assist with. So, additionally, we got a panel. We're going to try to go pretty quickly through everything because there's a lot of us to speak. We got Russell Clarke, who's managing director at FMI. They specialize in M&A transactions around specifically energy in the ESCO space. Got Jim Schaefer, who's managing partner over at Nenny and Associates. They specialize in talent recruitment and bringing you guys the best folks to run your companies. So Jim's the ultimate professional there. Got Ben Eastburn with Stinson LLP. Ben specializes in he's an attorney who keeps all of our butts out of hot water when it comes to performance contracting. And then we have Brian Montenegro, who's one of our principal engineers here at Walker Reid Strategies, or again, soon to be Walker Blue. Brian leads our energy engineering division and goes from there. So, with that being said, I'm gonna kind of pass it on. We're gonna get started with Russell, and we'll let him jump on in and tell us a little bit about FMI and the role they play with ESCO. So,
Great. Thanks, David. You can hear me okay, correct?
yeah.
Perfect. So Russell Clarke here. I'm a managing director with FMI. We are an investment bank that focuses on the built environment. We spend a lot of time focused on energy solutions, energy efficiency, and ESCO clients as a result. So glad to be here speaking to everyone. The other part of FMI, besides the investment bank, is a consulting firm. And so we focus on engineering and construction firms there. One of the unique things that we put out is a construction put in place forecast. And maybe to level set the ESCO industry and performance contracting is a key part of that amidst the broader built environment. We bucket the ESCO work into non-residential buildings from a construction put in place standpoint. So when we look at the outlook that our team puts together every year and over time, this is where you'd find the ESCO and performance contracting segment sitting. And I think an important thing to note around how the market views that is that it is very much viewed as a resilient or counter-cyclical aspect of non-residential building infrastructure and spending. So when we think about in context of it all and how transactions work, it's a good place to be amidst broader uncertainties. If you go to the next slide, please. When you think about some of the sub-segments that ESCOs traditionally serve, whether that's the MUSH market, municipalities, universities, schools, or hospitals, and then the C&I market, commercial and industrial, across the broader segments of construction spending, which includes upgrade and renovation projects, the core end markets that ESCOs and performance contracts are utilized for have a very strong outlook relative to a lot of the other segments of construction spending. So when we think about, are these contract structures going to be growing, shrinking, relevant going forward, we feel pretty pretty certain that they're in a really good spot relative to the end markets and the tailwinds and drivers behind construction spending there, which ultimately drives performance contract structures and the work put in place. Go to the next slide, please. When you think about the firms that are doing this work and performance contracting as an aspect of that, amidst the broader M&A and macro environment, so we've seen the M&A landscape be fairly resilient despite all the headlines and in many cases headwinds that have been put on the economy. So when you look at M&A transactions, whether it's volume or just straight aggregate deal amount, it remains slightly down, but valuations have remained steady. So while the number of deals has taken a little bit of a slowdown, the valuations have not seen an equal decrease across the broader M&A landscape yet. So we'll remain cognizant of whether that changes over time, but to date we're in a really interesting place given what we've seen amidst deals more broadly. Next slide, please. As you think about what's driving some of that around deal activity and fundraising, specifically related to private equity, which has become a major part of the ESCO segment and performance contracting segment as well, we've seen that the dollars put towards this have continued to increase. And so that from a transaction aspect driver is encouraging. What we've seen as a result of that has not just been free spending in the ESCO space or performance contracting, but really we've seen cautiousness come alongside that increase in dollars that have been raised to be deployed in the space. So where we've seen that come out in deals, as deals continue to move forward, we think there's a bit of an uptick in today's market, but we're seeing people move slower and move more cautiously as a result of some of the unknowns. So that pressure of money and capital that needs to be deployed across good investments remain, but people have taken a cautiousness as it relates to that. Next slide, please. This has resulted in a cautiousness amid an imbalance of good targets. So companies and service providers that are supporting the ESCO industry, and then this large and growing amount of interest from buyers, whether that's strategics, European or Asian conglomerates, or private equity platforms that are being built. That interest continues to grow, and that imbalance continues to grow as well between well-capitalized buyers and strong sellers. And so while that balance has continued to become imbalanced, we expect that gate that's been there to start to break a little bit. And we've seen that with a little bit of additional movement over the past 2 or 3 years to what we feel today we're seeing more volume there in certain core ESCO segments than we have in the past. So that pressure is starting to build, and we'll see if it results in a bigger break here. But to date, we feel pretty confident that imbalance is going to continue to drive a healthy level of deal activity, even amidst a lot of the unknowns that are plaguing the deal environment, and then more specifically the energy efficiency and ESCO environment as it relates to many aspects of the projects. Next slide, please. There have been some key takeaways that we've seen from transactions around performance contracting and how private equity and the M&A landscape is viewing that. So I'll run through these pretty quick, but not all contract structures as it's related to performance contracting are created equal. They are very buyer and asset dependent. So historically, option A or less risky contracts kind of drove deal flow and deal volume there when you looked at what was being transacted upon. Today, other riskier options or more comprehensive, deeper retrofit savings around option C and option D of some of the traditional contracts might be easily viewed as favorable, but it's going to be very dependent on the specific asset. We have seen a renewed focus on customer retention and upselling. So rather than focusing on contract structures, we've seen a lot of buyers really focus on the customer relationship. And so this could mean a provider that does design build contracts as opposed to performance contracting. It could mean contracts that have no guarantee to them in certain segments, but they're going to focus on what is that customer relationship with much heavier than they were in the past. The track record is still critical, so you need to perform on both guarantees, on growing customer relationships, and then on being able to maintain a profitable enterprise. So that's always been necessary, but that still matters more than ever in an environment like this. Scale isn't quite what it used to be, so it used to be bigger is generally always better. We have not seen that maintain its prominence. We've seen plenty of examples of smaller firms, smaller service providers that have been viewed more positively than some of the larger ones, simply because of the way they're able to solve problems for their clients and then maintain that track record just at a smaller scale. So that's encouraging, I think, to the broader environment. We've seen new models, contract structures specifically come into play and gain traction as it relates to performance contracting in hard to serve segments. So I'll use commercial and industrial segment and the energy as a service model that has become an aggregator, if you will, of many of these projects that didn't traditionally run through historic ESCOs, but that has become a interesting growth avenue. And then last around all this, which is kind of wrapping up what matters, is in an environment where there's a lot of unknowns like today, and in an environment where there's been a bit of a bumpy track record around some of the core service providers and contract structures, the optionality to serve a customer in a way that helps them solve problems, bring value, and get clients done has been valued by private equity buyers as well as strategic buyers when they're looking at firms that serve this industry. And so that broadening and optionality has really resulted in an expanding landscape. So on the next slide, you can see there's a lot more players in this landscape than there ever have been in the past. They're coming at it from different angles, whether that's traditional ESCOs or the engineering side or more of the utility focused program managers. But what you see is a bit of a convergence here of what have been traditionally siloed groups. And that has resulted in a broadening landscape for ESCO and energy solutions, which we see as a positive force on deal flow and deal volume here. And so while we remain a bit cautious around the broader aspects of the economy and all the unknowns there, we're cautiously optimistic as we see new players entering the field and becoming active participants in this performance contracting landscape. So I'll pause there and turn it back to David.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Russell. Thanks for that insight. And kind of when we look at all this, it's hey, there's some pretty good opportunities in this space around M&A and transactions and PE involvement. How do we hire the team to go get that accomplished? So I'll pass it over to Jim Schaefer with Ninny and Associates, and he'll tell us a little bit about what the landscape looks like from that point of view.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about hiring trends here in the ESCO industry. A little bit about Ninny. Obviously, as David mentioned, we're an executive search firm. We specialize in this space. We connect talent with the organizations there, whether they're looking for sales, engineering, operations, or executive level talent. That's where we can step in and help out. All right, so from an overview, what are we seeing right now? I think overall, we are seeing the market still being very much driven by infrastructure funding or lack thereof, private equity investment, as Russell was highlighting there, as well as sustainability goals of the clients and the end users that are in this space. When people ask me about what are you hearing, what are you seeing in the marketplace today, the word that keeps coming up is steady. I think we're seeing a steady amount of hiring for sales, leadership, and development engineering roles. Now, There certainly is some retrenching that's happening. There certainly is massive growth and investment that's happening, but I'd say those are more outliers. I think the consistent trend here that we're seeing is just a steady amount of hiring for a lot of those blocking and tackling type positions. And at the end of the day, I think this is a challenge that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but the ESPC industry still remains niche and super competitive for the right talent. All right, so what roles are in demand? I would say these are in order of priority. It doesn't matter who's in office, up economy, down economy. Good account executives who have a proven track record of success are always in demand, and that's certainly the case here today. And then next up would be project development engineers, folks that really understand the technical side as well as the client-facing side, which again, we're going to touch on a little bit later on in the presentation here. To a lesser degree, project management, operations management type roles. And then, of course, general managers and vice presidents. Just by the nature of the positions, we're not seeing as many, but folks that have a solid track record with those profiles at the executive level are always in demand as well. All right, so what are the trends? As mentioned, I think this top one here for project development engineers, it's an ongoing trend. It's an ongoing interest here. Folks that really have a strong technical background, mechanical engineering degrees, all the energy certifications, plus they have the ability to communicate effectively with customers. That's an evergreen skill set that our clients are always looking for and is still very much a trend today. I'd say one thing we've started to notice more of is retention-focused hiring. So an increase in sign-on bonuses to attract over the right people that are leaving to offset outstanding commissions or outstanding bonuses. So we're seeing a more aggressive position from some of our clients to pursue sign-on bonuses as well as long-term incentive plans. This next piece here, as far as salaries increasing, this should come at no surprise. At a macroeconomic level, everything's more expensive and salaries are no different. So we're certainly seeing that, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later as far as the challenge that presents. But one positive trend that we've noticed over the last 12 months is that we have clients, and we've seen ESCOs start to pursue candidates from outside of the industry, which is again, a very positive trend that I think is encouraging for our industry as long as they have the transferable skills. Now, we're seeing this more in the account executive or sales discipline versus engineering or project management, but folks that understand how to navigate a complex sales cycle and be able to sell a complex solution. So that's something that we've seen a handful of our clients start to invest in those individuals, so long as they have the right training and onboarding programs for them. And then one minor thing here, I'd say over the last 16 years, I have seen trends where small companies, large companies will invest in early career individuals, folks that are right out of college or 1 or 2 years of experience. I can't say that I'm seeing a whole lot of that lately. All right, so what are the challenges? As we mentioned at the very beginning, at the end of the day, it is a very small talent pool for ESPC specific experience. In spite of some of our clients starting to pursue some of the outside industry candidates, at the end of the day, the overarching challenge is it is a small industry, and most companies, most ESCOs, are looking for individuals with industry-specific experience. One other challenge that we see is the geographic mismatch between the appropriate talent. Let's say we do find somebody with relevant experience, cultural alignment. If they happen to be located in a spot where our clients don't have projects, there's a geographic mismatch, which certainly makes things more challenging. As far as the work from home, hybrid, in-office environment, we could do a whole separate webinar on that, which we're obviously not going to do, but that is certainly has tension in the marketplace between candidates and companies. So that is something that is we're facing as far as a challenge there. And then overall, I think we all can agree there is a high degree of market uncertainty right now. So with that does cause the classic paralysis by analysis as it relates to hiring. So that's something that we're trying to navigate as well. And then, as mentioned before, with the increased salaries, that is creating a challenge or a hurdle that we're trying to clear with existing pay structures amongst an ESCO or an organization struggling to meet where the candidates are at or where the market's at. So if someone's being compensated 10 to 15% higher than how you're compensating your existing team, that certainly presents some friction there. These are all going to sound pretty obvious and pretty straightforward, but the nature of what we do in our industry, I think at the end of the day, candidates are looking for mission-driven work focused on real impact. career advancement opportunities. I think that's something that you can bake into your recruitment strategy. Paint the picture, paint the vision on where this person can go as far as career growth. We talked about salaries. It's worth repeating that you need to have a competitive compensation and benefit package if you're going to attract the right talent. Also mentioned the flexible hybrid work options and environment, I think is paramount and something to consider as you're evaluating the right folks for your team. And then this last piece, I know it sounds super obvious, but it's worth mentioning, worth repeating. I believe candidates really are looking for positive and supportive leadership teams. All right, what skill sets are in demand? We've been seeing some of our ESCO clients pursue water, wastewater projects as a hedge against the traditional ESPC projects. Russell touched on this in his presentation, but we're seeing a demand for candidates with alternative financing models, right? Whatever you want to call it, whether it's P3 or energy as a service or anything that's off balance sheet, we see some of our clients starting to pursue some of those projects. So finding candidates with those skill sets is really attractive right now. Again, talking about private equity, the more involvement, the more investment from private equity into this space creates an environment where they're looking for candidates who can run at the appropriate pace. I think we all know private equity investment does move at a different pace than traditional ownership structures. So finding candidates who understand the pace and the game that private equity is bringing to the table. Relationships are still key. And then this last piece here, the ability to operate autonomously while maintaining a team environment. I know that might sound like it's contradictory or they're at two different ends of the spectrum here, but at the end of the day, I believe clients are looking for candidates who can maintain a high degree of a team environment, team involvement, while also being able to operate autonomously. All right, we're closing up here. How to compete for top talent. I would say how are we doing on time, David?
You're good. You're good.
Okay. So I'd say first off, have a hiring process. I think oftentimes that's taken for granted. So I define what your hiring process is, make sure it's efficient, and be prepared to condense your hiring process without compromising. So if you traditionally have 5 or 6 different individuals involved, it's okay to keep them all involved, but be prepared to move your schedules and be flexible to accommodate the limited time window for particular candidates that may be available. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but clearly communicate career growth and project visibility. What's it going to look like once they actually land here? Another piece, outline clear onboarding. Sometimes we see this as one of the main reasons why candidates don't work out if they end up leaving after 6, 9, 12 months, is they were never effectively onboarded. So don't take that for granted either. Be sure to define what your onboarding strategy looks like, and then stick to it and make sure that you're integrating your new team members effectively. And then the last piece here, on our end, and I think if you have an internal talent team or you're a leader, always be proactive in outreaching to the right candidates in the marketplace and maintaining those pipelines.
Right. And couple shameless plugs for Jim because he won't do them. So Jim runs an amazing podcast. What's the name of the podcast, Jim?
Building Efficiency Podcast.
Yeah, the Building Efficiency Podcast. He's great. He has great guests on a regular basis. And Brian Montenegro from our firm is coming up now and talking a little bit about the energy engineering side and the kind of trends we're seeing there. Another shameless plug for Jim is Jim actually worked with us to bring Brian to our firm. So we're very grateful. He did a great job. He's ultimate professional and did a phenomenal job finding the right candidate for us. So that being said, we'll pass it on to Brian.
Thanks, David. All right, next slide. All right, so yeah, Brian Montenegro, principal engineer with Walker Reid Strategy, soon to be Walker Blue. And a little bit about me, I have a little over 10 years in experience in the performance contracting, energy engineering world. Certified energy manager, certified energy auditor, and licensed engineer in several different states. And today we're just going to touch on some trends on the performance contracting side from more of the engineering and technology perspective. That being said, let's go ahead and start with evolving landscapes for performance contracting and the key shifts in the market that we're seeing. So the traditional low-hanging fruits like LED, basic controls, and equipment swap outs have largely been exhausted. if you think about LED, for the past, it's been about 10 years now, it's been largely accepted and adopted as a viable technology. So whether it's through performance contracting or through just regular maintenance updates that folks are doing in their buildings, we're no longer seeing the trend where, you kind of walk into any building that's not a new construction and there's just T12s or T8s everywhere. A lot of buildings, new and old, now have LEDs. And from a performance contracting perspective, the way that's traditionally used, the LED being the a big driver for savings, allows for these maybe more complex mechanical projects to take place utilizing all the savings from the LED. But when you don't have those LED savings that you can put into your project, what happens, right? That creates a little bit of demand for the more deeper, complex measures that still generate a lot of savings, but require that more the technical aspect to be a little bit bigger and higher, in requiring that more technical knowledge. There's a lot of trends, obviously, that kind of shape the performance contracting and energy market as a whole. But for the sake of time, we're only going to really touch on electrification today as one of the primary drivers we're seeing. And a good example of a market that's kind of pushing for that is New York, where you have legislation that's now pretty much eliminating in any new construction any gas-fired equipment. So you're having that push for electrification that it's now allowing us from a performance contracting side on the technology perspective to really push on those technologies and leverage them for the projects. These projects increasingly aim to eliminate fossil fuel infrastructure in favor of full building electrification. So go ahead and next slide, please. So talking about electrification, I'm going to hit on 3 different technologies here briefly. First one being geothermal. So the replacement of gas-based heating with ground source systems, again, for markets that are looking at that electrification piece, that really is a big driver. A lot of areas in the country with cold climates, moderate climates that need that heating, have a proven technology that's been around for decades, but it's kind of being reintroduced and reinvigorated. That from a engineering standpoint demands a little bit more accurate thermal modeling and life cycle planning, understanding that these types of systems require a little bit more maintenance, know-how, not as simple as say maybe a gas-fired system. So the folks in the space that are working on this from a maintenance perspective also need to be brought up to speed. And, that's where the engineering and operations comes into play to help develop those types of programs. Solar PV is another one that we see in the electrification space. So obviously, one of the main drivers would be the utilities getting more and more expensive. Electric utilities are getting more and more expensive. And also the demand for the electrification adds more stress on a building and the electrical system of that building. And solar PV can help offset some of that. But, it requires that additional level of engineering, detailed analysis of rate structure, seasonability, system integration, working with different design and engineering teams as a project development engineer, understanding enough to be able to work with those teams and integrate the project in the right way into the performance contract. Similar to that, you have battery energy storage, where kind of, that we've seen a lot of trends when you pair that with solar PV and maybe a microgrid system. Use those systems to manage peak demand and support the resiliency programs that a lot of these customers are now pushing towards as well. Paired with that electrification, it helps kind of push that trend towards the electrification that we're seeing with these technologies. And all 3 require precision in engineering, solid commissioning practice, and thoughtful M&B to validate and sustain that performance of these technologies. Go ahead, next slide. So where does engineering come to play in all this? Like we were saying in the first slide, right? The energy engineering piece of performance contracting used to be a lot more, let's call it surface level. So now the audits need to be not just evaluating the efficiency, but really looking at the building holistically from an electrification potential standpoint. And then energy models have to reflect actual usage. They need to be a little bit more involved in utilizing programs that you can connect utility bills and really model the building so that when you're implementing ECMs, you have a much better idea of how they're going to affect the building and what the effects of each one are individually together. And MMV is has to be on the back end of these projects rigorous and data driven. Obviously, for the financing piece of performance contracting and the performance guarantees, projects, technologies that are getting more complex require a little bit of a more involved process from the engineering perspective on the measurement and verification side. And even things like tax credits, like 179D and 45L, with the right process as MMV, definitely aid in categorizing and getting the right data for those types of things. Bottom line is performance contracting is becoming more technical, data-driven, and system integrated, and engineering is the foundation of enabling this transformation. So engineers are becoming more important. Like Jim said, it's one of the trends that we're seeing, in the hiring space. Obviously the technical know-how, but not just having the technical know-how, being able to communicate that to customers effectively. It's really becoming more and more prevalent as technologies of the past, LEDs and equipment changeouts are going away and more complex projects are coming along.
Great, Brian. Thank you. Brian runs a great energy engineering team. We augment lots of ESCOs in anything related to audits, ASHRAE audits, M&V, IGAs. So he can, if anybody has any projects there, need help on the engineering front, while Jim's hiring them for you, Brian can handle it in the meantime. So we're happy to help there. That being said, word performance contract gets thrown around a lot, right? ESPC and contract is one of the key components and key words within that. Now let's have Ben Eastburn tell us a little bit about, what that looks like and what are some of the best practices around structuring your contracts and deals.
Yeah, thanks very much, David. It's a pleasure to be with you all. As David so helpfully put it at the outset, we at Stinson like to help keep your butts out of trouble, and we've been doing that for some time, several decades, in fact. In the case of one of my partners, Steve Lindeman, who I'm sure many of you know well, but we handle all matter of transactions, including M&A work, construction, EPC agreements, and the like. We handle PPAs, and we also do M&A work as well. So we have a deep bench when it comes to the performance contracting industry. It's been a pleasure to serve many of you for years, and we look forward to continuing to do that. Next slide, please. So before we delve into the sort of contracting best practices for performance contracting, it helps to start at the anatomy of a typical dispute. And while we do like to keep you out of trouble to the greatest extent possible, we have seen our fair share of disputes, and we've helped resolve a number of those. And in doing so, we have compiled a sort of anatomy of a typical performance contracting dispute. So it's helpful to begin with these factors that we typically see so that we can then try to avoid them. The first thing that we typically see in a dispute is a perception issue, namely that the customer tends to say that it is small, it's unsophisticated, doesn't have the experience in the industry, and it's being taken advantage of by a big company, sophisticated contractors, those who have deeper knowledge about how performance contracting works. So you have this sort of power imbalance that is typically relied upon. We also see disputes arise where there's substantial turnover of personnel, both on the customer side and on the ESCO side. When those people who are really invested in the project, who have poured a lot into it, leave, and somebody new comes in, or perhaps a new administration takes over, you tend to see disputes arise. There's also aggressive plaintiffs' counsel who just aren't familiar or who don't desire to learn about how performance contracting works. And they like to try to exploit perceived power imbalances or things that they may claim are not exactly above board, but that they just don't understand or choose not to understand. Along that same front, we see expert witnesses hired by the plaintiff who do not understand performance contracting and and all of its idiosyncrasies, and so they exaggerate damages. But then those two things together sets up unrealistic expectations for the customer about how they've been harmed or even whether they've been damaged at all. And so that works against us in trying to get disputes resolved. So we try and combat these issues on the front end in the contracting process. Next slide. So one thing that we advise is to be careful not to overpromise your services or your savings. Here's two examples that we've seen that have been used in sort of pre-contracting documents during the sales process. We really advise not to say that there's a project that will be without risk or eliminates risk for a customer. It's just never the case that there's a project with zero risk. And we understand that, to get a project sold, you want to make it as attractive as possible, but we really urge caution with respect to what you can actually promise on the front end. Next slide. It is a limited and conflicting baseline data is a major risk. Brian was sort of alluding to this during his presentation, but energy models need to reflect accurate conditions. And so here's I put up here an internal email that we've seen regarding historic data. And we just really encourage you, and we understand that sometimes it's difficult to get the data you need from a customer, but it's very important to be relentless and ensure that you do get that data before entering into a contract so that your modeling and your data is based on the most accurate conditions. Next slide. You want to avoid discrepancies between the contract and your pre-contract documents to the greatest extent possible. We understand that things change between, during the process. Ooh, I'm getting a message that says folks cannot hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, Jim. I can hear you, Ben. You
can. Okay.
Yep. All good, Ben.
All right. Thank you. I'll keep going then. So you, as I was saying, you want to avoid discrepancies between your contract and pre-contract documents. We understand things change as you negotiate your contract, but having those discrepancies does raise the risk profile of your project. So there's a couple examples I put here on the screen. In an audit report, we've seen things like savings will not be adjusted for any measure based on either current year weather or plant load changes. And then in the contract, it says if flows or strengths vary from the baseline will be adjusted using standard engineering equations. So those kinds of discrepancies can be something that an unscrupulous or enterprising plaintiff's counsel may latch onto. Another example that we've seen is an offer for open book pricing in a proposal, and then a contract that's silent on that score. And again, it creates some uncertainty and risk when those pre-contract documents diverge from the contract. So if you are going to depart from what you suggested or said in a pre-contract document, it's helpful to make that explicit as you go into the contracting process. Next slide. If there are discrepancies in your M&V methodology that can cause confusion, as Brian mentioned, M&V accuracy is very important, and it's equally important to be clear on what the methodology will be. So in this example, this is a real life example from a contract that we've seen. It said first, the savings for this particular ECM are stipulated. And then, as you'll see in the last sentence, it says the ESCO is responsible for the miss of savings and will reimburse the customer for the missed savings. Well, if the savings are stipulated, how can they be missed or not met? That creates ambiguity and confusion and therefore risk. So you want to make sure that these types of discrepancies, particularly in the same provision in a contract, aren't present. Next slide, please. Capital cost avoidance is another thorny issue. Of course, you want to make sure it's allowed in the jurisdiction in which you're operating. Make sure that you're explaining it to the customer in detail and that you document that explanation and that conversation occurred. And we encourage you to consider including a contract provision where the customer promises to include those savings in future budgets, just to make sure that they understand what's happening and successive administrations or council members understand what's happening and what they need to do. It also protects you. Next slide. These are the first two bullets are fairly obvious. If you have internal contracting policies, follow them. You have them for a reason. Make sure you stick to them in each project. Make sure that you are looking at all of the applicable laws, not just the guaranteed energy saving statutes in your applicable jurisdiction. Of course, that's important, but also contractor bill of rights statutes. Do you have a prompt payment law that's applicable? Make sure your indemnity provisions comply with the laws of the applicable jurisdiction. You don't want your indemnity provision to be deemed unenforceable later on. That could cause a huge issue for you. And this may be counterintuitive, but especially on larger projects, you may want to encourage your customer to hire a consultant and certainly to retain outside legal counsel. It just gives the customer confidence that the project is beneficial and is above board. And you know, we really don't see performance contractors gaming the system. We see a lot of integrity in this industry, but you want your customer to have that confidence in you as well. So we encourage you to just consider that approach. Next slide. And lastly here, we just want to make sure that you carefully assign the risks in your contract to the party who can control the risk. That it kind of seems obvious, but you want to really think through who has control over whether a particular condition occurs, and make sure that it's very clear in the contract. This provision is an example of a really good risk allocation provision. On this particular project, the savings was predicated on the customer switching to natural gas from the power grid. And this provision clearly states that the ESCO is not responsible for providing the gas. The customer was responsible for contracting with the power company at a certain rate. And guess what happened? The customer didn't do so, thinking and hoping that the gas prices would go down. And of course, they went up. So when the customer inevitably came looking for the ESCO to make up the resulting shortfall, the ESCO was able to fall back on this well-documented provision. So we encourage you to do likewise and assign risks to the party that can control them. If you have any other questions about contracting, we are more than happy to help to answer your questions, and we're standing by ready to assist. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And as Ben mentioned, having that independence is important, and that's a role that a lot of us here on this call are playing. Specifically, the Walker Reid folks, the Walker Blue folks, we kind of specialize in that independent third party certification, whether it be for 179D, for ITC, for prevailing wage and apprenticeship. That's really some of the strength that we bring to the table to be able to provide that independence around energy engineering and tax incentives. So next slide, Weston. So that being said, here we are. We're my presentation piece of this shifted a little bit. We were previously going to talk about all the wonderful things around 179D and ITC and how those things can add value to the project. And they're still wonderful. They're just wonderfully expiring and sunsetting based on the new big, beautiful bill that was signed into law here on July 4th. Couple areas. This gives you a just general idea and of the different sunsetting dates. There's different rules and different provisions for each section that may be applicable to your project and your client type. I'm using this more as a reference so that we can share it with you in the future. If you go on to the next slide, one of the most important factors here is the start date of construction or was stipulated and was put into the BBB with different dates corresponding to that previous slide. But now, what happened there initially is we thought, well, hey, they're going to go back to the IRA rules that were set in under prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirement to create the guidance as far as what considers a start date. When is start of construction? What rules apply around that? And then very shortly after, I think it was Monday or Tuesday after the bill was signed, President Trump enacted an executive order requiring guidance from the Secretary and Treasury to include the details and the enforcement around start of construction within 45 days. So that kind of creates some uncertainty where, well, will they stick to this historical guideline that looks at the physical work test in the beginning of construction, or will they shift in the 5% safe harbor, which allows you to have 5% of project cost being implemented. But now we're in a waiting game again because we won't know for 45 days, assuming Treasury complies with the executive order and gets this out in time. We're not really sure if what that's going to look like. Could 5% turn into 10%? Could it turn into 20%? Was this a political move that was, part of the promises that were made to get the House to sign off on this bill and ram it through? Were some of these executive orders part of the concessions that were put out there, and they're going to handcuff projects? We don't know. Once again, it's right now it's a little bit of a challenge to really go and make that decision. We're going to be hosting another webinar coming up. If you guys want to register for it, we can throw the link in the chat specifically on the BBB, and we're going to get kind of deep into it. You can go on to the next slide. And these are the specific rules currently, historically, about beginning of construction and safe harbor. My takeaway would be, if your provision and tax incentive that you're looking to take advantage of is specifically tied to beginning of construction, if whenever possible, if you want to take advantage of it, we need to get construction started, boots on the ground, ASAP, and meet the physical work test. I think that the odds are high that that'll remain the same. I think they'll play around with the 5% safe harbor rule around, spending 5% prior considers, a start. These are the rules specifically, if you guys want to read through them into more details when we send out the slide. But again, my takeaway there is, if you're looking to take advantage of this stuff, you need to start construction ASAP. Go to the next slide, Weston. So 179D is the energy efficient commercial building deduction. Most of you are very familiar with it. Many of the ESCOs use this incentive to reduce their own tax liability, to change around operating values and whatnot. Under the BBB, so it basically stated that it's available for projects that begin construction prior to June 30th of 2026. So again, getting the project going, getting construction started, any activities that need to be taken to accelerate that process, we highly recommend getting those starts done ASAP. And as soon as we have further guidance from Treasury, we'll obviously communicate it to everybody on exactly what that looks like when you're meeting the 5% safe harbor or whatever that ends up being. But the key there, and one of my takeaways there is, it's very important to, if this has been part of your tax strategy and you've been kind of managing how much 179D you've been taking over the years, like, only wiping out your profit and whatnot, this may be time where, if you have more square footage to certify, you may want to bank these deductions, because could this come back? Yes. Could it fall into tax expenditures? Absolutely. But as it's written now, any project that doesn't start prior to that June 30th date kind of expires, and there is the ability to carry forward these tax incentives into the future. So, this might be the year where, if you needed 10 million in 179D and you have 20 available, it might be worth paying for the 20, getting them all certified, and carrying forward some of those losses that get created by doing so for future years' revenues, offsetting and whatnot. So a little bit about Section 48 and 48E. Solar and wind projects that begin construction before July 4th of 2026 are protected under the current ITC rules. Projects starting construction after that date are subject to the phase-out schedules. Energy storage, geothermal, and technologies continue to qualify, but they all must now meet sourcing requirements and avoid the foreign entity involvement. So those domestic content studies are more important than ever. Again, having an independent third party be the one like Walker Blue to take care of that for you provides a lot of assurance to and takes a lot of that risk off of you. Section 30C, the credit for refueling and charging equipment ends for projects not placed in service by June 30th of 2026. Again, that impacts commercial, residential, and multifamily EV installations. Next slide. So good news is they didn't touch direct pay and the transferability. You still have the ability to transfer and these incentives if that's part of your strategy. The direct pay element for the MUSH market and tax exempt entities is still available. So that's a positive. All right. So it's still kind of the same rules as were, under the IRA from that point of view. We just have a sunsetting provision essentially on those. And then prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are still on the table. They're still required for projects over a megawatt to be able to meet, or if you're doing 179D and you're trying to take the 5 times multiplier, the PWA is still a factor. Again, having an independent third party like Walker Reid certify your PWA is another critical component to the success of these projects and protecting these tax credits and their transferability elements that exist with them. So 45L tax credit, not really applicable to this group, but that's pretty much going away. If the project isn't already an Energy Star protocol, odds are it's not going to get leased or acquired by July 1st, and it's not pretty much done. So that one they've been getting rid of here for the last couple of years since the IRA really kicked that one in the pants as well. One of the for any PPA deals or any private sector or CNI on the solar and CHP, geothermal, etc. One of the changes that they made, and this is still we're going to have to see what the guidance comes out of Treasury looking like, but they got rid of the 5-year accelerated depreciation from any projects that were started from December 31st or in 2024 and beyond. So not a big deal in the mush space or on the direct pay side, but affects the private sector when we look at that. And the advanced manufacturing credits, section 45X, that remains available for domestic production of clean energy components. However, eligibility now excludes entities with foreign ownership and prohibited sourcing. So wind-related components begin to phase out after 2027. Next slide. And some of the good things that happened here, for CNI world, 100% bonus depreciation got put back on the table. So any lighting contractors, lighting retrofitters, that brings the QIP back into play, allows lighting to be depreciated over 100% bonus, which is a nice incentive. They changed around the 179 expensing, not 179D. And then the big one for a lot of the ESCOs is they brought back Section 174. A full expensing resumes in 2025. So once Section 174 was really having a negative effect on the R&D, with not allowing the amortized expenses to get pulled forward in 2022 through 24. This has been clarified and fixed within this time, within this BBB. So next slide. All right. I know we're pretty much out of time, but anybody have any Q&A? Weston, do we got anything keyed up?
Yeah, we do. Bill has asked, I understand geothermal incentives would stay. He's kind of asking that as a question. Can you confirm, and if direct pay to munis would stay for that?
Yes, for the time being, that is correct. The way it's written, yes, they will stay.
Okay. That's only one I've got. Anyone else, if you want to quickly throw them in there? I know we're tight on time, but thanks, Bill, for the question.
Yeah. And there was another question, and maybe it would be good for the group of Russell if you want to chime in. Somebody asked about any insight on average multiples we're seeing in each of the 5 buyer categories: foreign, Ntrax, adjacent providers, etc. Russell, you want to voice over some of that?
Sure. I mean, it's very transaction specific, so caveat that. But amidst the broader range of metrics that you generally see in the ESCO space, call it anywhere from 6 to 12 times, we've seen some of the foreign entrants be more aggressive in valuation, and we've also seen some of the adjacent players, specifically more of the trade-based organizations, be aggressive as well.
Right. Thank you. Next slide, Weston. Keep going. Next one. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Here's a main contact information. If you need to get a hold of us at Walker Reid, you can come contact me, and I can get you in touch with Brian if you have anything on the energy engineering side. Russell with FMI, greatly appreciate the insight on the industry. Russell's information is there. These are the top experts in M&A transactions and getting deals done in this space. So we appreciate your questions there and your guidance there. And Jim, if anybody needs to hire some talent and looking to grow, Jim and his team at Nenny and Associates are a great resource. And then, nobody likes to think about it, especially me, especially the salespeople. Salespeople hate to think about this stuff, but Ben and his team at Stinson do a phenomenal job of keeping your butts out of hot water. Salespeople love to promise things. You always got to look at everything from that risk perspective as well. So that's an important aspect as well. So then there was one more question that came in. It says, what is the impact on energy storage? So energy storage falls under 40, kind of like geothermal as well. So energy storage does not have that phase out provision. I mean, it phases out as it was per the IRA, which is about 10 years. But it's not one that got really hit under the BBB. So, All right. Well, with that being said, we greatly appreciate it. We'll be sending out this presentation, and if anybody has any questions or something you think of, feel free to email us, reach out, LinkedIn, call, etc. We're all happy to answer and help you guys out here. So thank you again.